when you're working with AI, who gets to call themselves the author? And this brings us back to that 1884 photographer, Napoleon Sarony. He was taking a picture of the famous poet, Oscar Wilde. You could compare him to like Kendrick Lamar. He was one of the most famous at the time. And he had this image and says, I want to copyright it. Well, cameras were brand new, like AI. They'd already done the printing press, right? That was the first wave of content copyright. Now they do the camera. And that camera turned around and the law said, wait a minute, that's a tool. And the way he set it up, the lighting, the things that go into making it a shot made it human. Could be a little like prompting, couldn't it? In fact, when I took those photos into Midjourney and I said, give me these two next to each other exactly as they are, as best I could, you can see the examples here. They're just duplicates that sort of look like it, but it wasn't able to follow my instruction, which is more a prompt thing. But look at what they did. They turned something unique into something like everything else. That's why creativity matters in AI. Because if we don't have the human element, we're going to get this pushing everything to the middle. See, AI is a probability soup of millions of influences. How do you trace that? How do you compensate it? And more importantly, who owns what comes out? Ownership is really where it gets this messy because authorship is where it comes from. We can play around with that. Who was important? Was there human involvement? But ownership, that brings in all these different influences and doesn't even talk about the AI developers and AI platforms that are really important to be able to create this. You can't just come in, you can't just come to my house and take what I created and walk out. That's what's blatantly being done because they say they can't pay for it. But now world opens, you're going to make $100 billion. Yeah, you got some money for content. Let's run 3 simulations. These are the 3 things I was talking about the earlier part. I see is coming out. Number 1 is Shakespeare in Code. This really inspired me because Shakespeare's King Lear was never really put on till about the 1800s, a couple of hundred years after his death. They didn't get it when he was alive. And things like Zora Neale Hurston's work, like Their Eyes Were Watching God, which was published in the 30s, but because of various reasons, was ignored by the existing control structures. People are running things, running publishing. And now, with things opening up and scholars discovering her, this work goes further and further. We run into the same thing, that Shakespeare in Code. We may be losing some of the best things by just putting them in to an LLM and not rewarding the creator of it. Because creativity is a small percentage game. It's like baseball. If you get a 1 in 3 hit in your creative career, that is great. It's very small and very few people get paid. But we have this technology to work with the creative. That's what I call Shakespeare in Code. And by the way, you want to talk about who's getting eliminated? Creative people called coders, engineers. Entry and mid-level jobs are gone. So if we just sort of skip that over, just like Shakespeare in Code, and say, yeah, we don't worry about it, how are we going to bring up the next generation to actually create tech? Or is it really, are we just giving up to AI? That's a big assumption. Number 2, open canvas approach. Treat creativity like open source. Nurture, share, but allow that actually rises up in influence within these models, within our work, to be able to be rewarded based on the audience liking it. Because in the end, the real value of the work is what the audience sees, the reader sees, who sees something different from the other person. There's been an argument by Roland Barthes in a famous essay called The Death of an Author, that really authors aren't anything but collectors of cultural ideas and their own experience, but that the audience is the one that brings meaning. Well, he didn't say authors don't have meaning. The audience is central to the game. So if we're in an open canvas kind of thing, we want contribution, getting compensation. It doesn't have to be payment. It can be services. It can be tech. It can be brought into these communities where you share your creativity, your mindset, nurture this talent, grants, scholarships. Make this a positive thing because the way they interact is going to make that thing smarter. They're going to show you things a bunch of people sitting in a room, especially just engineers, might not see, which is why you see so many bringing in diverse sort of people to work with them. But in the end, the audience is going to shape it if we let it. And that's where the creative comes in. And that's where the person who's on the edge, not in the center. Because this stuff that's really great doesn't come in the middle. It comes from places we don't expect. How can we encourage that? How can we not only compensate in a way, just give people a chance who really are doing well to find that as a career? Because if we lose just that, wow, just math and engineering, that's just half the world, a great half, but it's not the whole deal.